Thanks for that introduction. It's nice to meet you all. Thanks for being here. Uh, so yeah, I work for an architecture firm, Hassell, and we do a lot of workplaces, both in America and around the world. And I don't know, as you can kind of imagine, the last 2 years, we've had a bunch of clients coming to us. I'm just really unsure of what the future is going to look like. And so we've been working with a lot of clients on sort of how they can transition their companies into new spaces or rethink how they're operating in their businesses. And then I guess like within Hassell, my sort of main role is leading our workplace research program. So we do a whole bunch of different research, but I thought maybe one place to start today would be to share some of the research that we've just recently completed. This is actually going to be the first time I've presented this work publicly. So it's really quite fresh, but it's an annual survey that we do every year, looking at people's attitudes to work. And so this is a survey that we ran in April of this year. And like I said, it's still sort of early, but I'll give you a sort of a sense of, I think, where things are at the moment. One of the things that we talk a lot about with our clients is sort of how the return to work is going and what the sort of big changes, big sort of changes in focus are. So if you remember back to the early start of the pandemic, people were talking a lot about like elevator capacity and like social distancing and I don't know, like hygiene and stuff like that. Like those were the big topics in workplace design. And we're sort of moved on from a lot of those things now. And now we're focusing more, I think, on the sort of long-term things about how the culture of work has changed, how expectations have changed, how digital transformation has changed. These are the kind of, I think, there will be the lasting impacts of the pandemic on the workforce. On the next slide here, we have, this is some research that we've been doing, looking at what workplace model people would prefer. And it's similar to what you saw earlier, where a lot of people want to go back to offices sort of much as they were during the pandemic. There's a small group of people that want to work remotely full time. But when you survey people, there's actually a lot of people in the middle that want these hybrid solutions. They want some degree of flexibility, some degree of kind of choice over where they work. But I think what's really interesting is that when you look at all kind of 5 or 6 of those models laid out, there isn't really consensus in the population. It's not like everyone's saying that I want to do this one thing, or everyone's saying they want to do this one thing. And indeed, when you look at an individual company, there's variety. When you look at a group of companies, there's variety. There's no kind of consensus in what's driving people. On the next slide, this is a question that we ran this year, looking at which days people wanted to come into the office and for how long. In Australia, they've been calling these people the twats, the people that want to come in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I think this is going to pose a really big problem for office design. It's obviously not particularly efficient to have an office that's empty 4 days a week and having people coming in 3 days a week. So then how do you design an office where the office feels like a place that you want to go in on Monday and Friday, that doesn't feel deserted, feels energetic, but can still handle this increase in capacity on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? On the next slide, this was another question that we ran, looking at one of the questions that we ask in the survey is like, we ask people basically where they're intending to quit their company, and we do that scientifically. So it's actually like, seems surprising that you can ask people that, but you can actually ask people that and get a pretty good sense of whether or not they're intending to quit. And here we've married it up against workplace policies. What you'll see there is that, sort of as Mary was saying in the start, like people that have companies where there basically isn't a policy, where they have flexibility to choose where they want, much less likely to be thinking about quitting their job than people who are forced into either of those two extremes of either working full-time in the office or working full-time at home. So again, I think it's sort of picking up that there's this change in the industry where employees are really demanding a lot of flexibility, a lot of autonomy in their work. They have a lot of power in the marketplace at the moment, and they're using that power within that marketplace to really push for this. And the final slide here is just looking at the buildings themselves and what people are asking for. So we asked people what they would like to see in their office when they return. We see this every time we run the survey. Free food and lunch always tops the list, which, I mean, it seems kind of trivial, but I think when you really get down to people's motivations around that, it's about connecting and being with one another and breaking bread and like sharing. Like that's part of the reason that you come into an office, is to share a meal with someone and to experience that. But you'll see kind of right below there, the things, particularly in the United States, that really dominate the list. Things around kind of wellness, so things like a private gym, a wellness space, and then things that are to do with either the air or the outdoors. So the fresh air from outside or gardens and green spaces are kind of the big sort of amenities that people want to see in buildings at the moment. And I think it makes a lot of sense considering the amount of time that was spent indoors and this natural connection that we have as humans to connect to the biophilic world, to the outdoors. So yeah, I'll, I guess, leave it there, but that's just like a sort of snapshot, I guess, of where things are at the moment in terms of people's attitudes towards the return to work.
Daniel, if I can ask you quickly, what are
Yeah.
you seeing as the most innovative solution short-term versus longer-term thinking of that redesigning the office of 4 days empty and 3 days exciting? What are the things you're seeing your clients try to do to try to solve for this near-term versus longer-term?
Yeah, so I think near term, there's obviously little incentives that they're doing, like drinks on Fridays or food and stuff, like creating events. We've also had companies that are doing things like deliberately not choosing to, say, stream some of their events online so that there was a reason for people to come in and to experience that sort of intimacy of being around one another. I think sort of long term, the question really is about their workplace strategy and really like, are they creating a space that aligns with the goals of the organization and their people? It may make sense actually for an organization to have only people coming in only 3 days a week, but they have to sort of design around that and think about like which teams are coming in on what days, how are they going to foster those collaborations between different groups if they're not always in the office at the same time. So there's a lot of complexity to work through with that. And yeah, I think in the short term, maybe it's about these sort of more trivial sort of incentives. And then in the long term, it's really about these structural changes to how organizations operate and how their workplaces support them.
Great.